Now, he's also met with the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. And by the way, both sides agreed it was a positive meeting. And now there's talk he's going to meet with Fox News' Geraldo Rivera really soon. So will this start a more conciliatory tone? Let's ask the man himself, Fox News' Geraldo Rivera. He's here with us. First of all, you got to tell us about this meeting, you and Donald.
Well, I have to ask Erickson, if you don't mind, Charles. I mean, does he regret disinviting Donald Trump to his event? I mean,
nope.
Do you now agree that you, in your own words, severely underestimated the staying power of Donald Trump? And would you, in retrospect, have still yanked that invite if you knew he was going to be at 30% and dominating the GOP field?
I sure would have.
All right.
Maybe.
Listen, Erick, when you were getting mic'd up, Erick admitted that he underestimated the idea that Trump would be at 30% right now. But I want to ask
Trump's going to be the nominee.
So you're convinced?
I am convinced. I've been saying it for 2 weeks.
You're still a Republican, right?
I am still a Republican.
You're still a Republican.
And registered in Manhattan County, and I can vote in
So, Geraldo, you and Trump, you guys are going to get together soon.
Well, you know what I wanted. I mean, Trump and I, we did the Celebrity Apprentice. I was one of the contestants. So I was with him every day for 6 weeks. I've known him for many years, for decades, really. And I get a sense of the guy, and I always thought that in some ways he was being caricatured. And I believe that
in this caricature, or he was the caricature himself. In other words, he doesn't have anybody pulling his strings.
You're right. He is both a caricature, a character, and he was being caricatured. And I think that in the Hispanic community, particularly because of his harsh stance on the border and because of now these statements about Jeb Bush using the Spanish language as if that was in some way, a negative thing, I think that he's creating a stereotype, and he has a stereotype. I thought that if his wife, his beautiful wife Melania, and my beautiful wife Erica, the four of us could go to a Mexican restaurant together, and I asked him this on the air. We spoke for 45 minutes.
Why couldn't it be Swedish or German or something like that?
We spoke for 45 minutes on the phone yesterday, and he agreed, and we're going to make a date. And I don't want him to be demonized, but I don't want him to be a demonizer either. And this campaign, I think, is absurd and anti-intellectual that he criticizes Jeb Bush.
It's funny Geraldo says that. I think I've probably been writing since last June and stand by this, that if Donald Trump Sr. were running for president instead of the Donald, I think he'd be well ahead of the polls where he is right now. Because I think you're right to some degree. He's being stereotyped, but he's also running as the Donald from TV.
But what
he's
is he
a
being
brilliant
stereotyped
businessman.
as, Erick, what is he being stereotyped as?
Good question.
Oh, I think he's running. People are stereotyping him as the reality TV series star and not the serious person that he is behind the scenes. And I think to some degree he's playing to that. And while that's helped him, I think if Donald J. Trump Sr., the man who built all these buildings in New York, were running, as opposed to the guy from reality TV, I think he probably would be doing a lot better.
Although, Geraldo, he took pains to make sure today that he said, listen, it's not about anger. It's about the fact that people like him because they think he can be the man Erick talked about. What he's done with his success with real estate, building that up, he can rebuild America, to paraphrase, make us great again. Do you think that that's starting to come through rather than the idea that he's tapped into frustration and anger?
A couple of points. So Erick says if he ran as Donald Trump Sr. as the builder, that would be the positive and he'd be further ahead. He is a magnificent builder, and infrastructure decay and deterioration in this country is a real issue. But there's more to him than that. There's also the fact that he is enormously successful. We celebrate on this network wealth. And the accumulation of wealth, honestly,
the last three losers of the White House, though, were all multimillionaires. The last three people that lost.
The difference is Trump is not taking anybody else's money. The public knows how rotten Washington is. You and I, we travel around. You see these lobbyists. You see how they infect every issue, and politicians voting the way their donors tell them to vote. That is what's most refreshing to me about Trump, that he is self-financing, that no one can corrupt him.
That was
he
the
is
loudest,
his own man.
Erick, that was the loudest, that got the loudest applause today during the press conference. I noticed when he talked about that. I don't know. In ways, I think Trump could be boxing himself in because it does cost a few bucks to win this thing, and I don't know if he wants to write a check for $500 million or $1 billion. But I do want to ask both of you guys. I want to circle back to the issue of the wall. This is what propelled him into the public conscience. This is what created the controversy. Geraldo, a report out today in the most latest polls that 59% of Americans actually agree with the idea of deporting illegals. So this is something I don't think Donald Trump is going to back down from, but this offends you.
I ask you to wait on this news story. All right, now we're all working, and now we see the video clip of the ICE agents going into Juan and Maria's house because Juan is undocumented, Maria is a citizen, or she's here legally, their children's citizen born, and they're taking, everybody has to go. You want to keep the family together? Everybody's got to go. One of those stories. We see how our hearts are breaking seeing these shots of the migrants in Turkey and in Greece, and
did you see the
3-year-old who drowned.
Yeah, I mean, that was heartbreaking. I know.
Does Donald Trump want that? That's what's going to happen.
Eric, there's no doubt about that. The reason Donald Trump says we don't win wars, the reason we haven't is because once they came into our living room, we couldn't take them. But I do also want to ask you on the same topic, because I want you to listen to a bite, but as I set it up, will the core followers, the core people who jumped on the Donald Trump bandwagon initially, I don't think they want any form of immigration. And today he left the door open for immigration. In his words, the right way, the smart way. Take a listen, Eric, and I want to ask you about that.
I want people to come into our country legally. I want to have a big, fat, beautiful, open door.
So Eric, what do you make of that? Because, again, I think two things happened today. I think by signing this pledge, he offended some of his core followers, the initial people who jumped on the bandwagon. And by making this statement, there are people who are saying, listen, we don't need STEM workers. We don't need people picking vegetables. We need to build a wall and stop all immigration.
You know, let me go back to Geraldo's point real quick. That I don't think we need to be breaking up families as the party of family. I think that's a bad thing. I do think that people who come to this country need to respect the law, and I think that's what Trump is getting at, that we need to deal with illegal immigration, but we've always been a country of legal immigration. My last name is Erickson. My grandfather was an immigrant from Sweden. We've always been a country of immigrants, but legal immigrants. And you know, we've got these situations in this country now where people are angry.
We can't sweep 11 to 13 million illegals under the rug. There's got to be a concrete response or answer. So far, Donald Trump has been the only candidate that says, I got a plan. I'm going to send them all back together.
Well, I don't. Even Donald Trump, after he said that, kind of walked it back. I think Donald Trump's point on build the wall first and see what happens is probably where most of the Republican candidates will settle. Because if you really do build a wall, if you're really serious about building that wall, the dynamics change dramatically after the wall is built.
I think that he's brilliant in terms of saying we want to keep the brilliance here. You go to Wharton, you go to Harvard, you go to Yale, you go to a great American school, and then we're going to kick you out because your student visa has expired. What's the sense of that?
I think the argument there, though, Geraldo, is why are we letting those people come to these schools when we have American students who can't get in them in the first place?
I have a different view. Europe is stagnated. Russia is depopulating. You have those Western nations are decaying demographically. They're getting older and older.
No doubt about it.
The pensioners are more and more. The young people, fewer and fewer. That's why the young people are fleeing Europe to come to the United States. I want to harness that immigrant vigor. I want our nation to have the broad backs of immigrants on which to build itself. I agree we need order. I agree we need secure boundaries. But for goodness sake, don't lose this resource that we have so carefully cultivated.
What do you make of the notion that Donald Trump says he will win the Hispanic vote? Is it too early to tell, or is the die been cast too deeply?
It's an excellent question. I think that because he is charismatic, and I don't know whether it was you or Eric who said that he is a star in many ways, so I think he has star power appeal, but you cannot insult a whole race of people, then expect them to turn the other cheek. That's why I want to take them to the Mexican restaurant.
If after you guys eat, and I'm getting a rap signal, but real quick, if you guys have this dinner, bring me a burrito. If he comes back and gives some sort of even semblance of an apology about the Mexican rapist thing, would that change the entire dynamic?
He hasn't apologized since third grade.
All right, guys, let's leave it there.